Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for December 7, 2025. Today, we are happy to have with us one of our most frequent guests, Benyamin Poghosyan, who is a senior fellow at APRI Armenia, Yerevan-based think tank. Hello, Benyamin. Welcome to the Groong podcast.
Hello, Asbed. Hello, Hovik. As always, pleasure to be with you.
Ողջույն Benyamin ջան. And I want to begin actually by a point of remembrance. Last week was December 7, the 37th anniversary of the tragic earthquake in 1988, claiming so many lives. We talked about this last year, but I think it's a somber occasion that is worth recalling because I think the consequences of that earthquake still have not, may have had like a huge impact on Armenia, and the effects of it still have not been, restored, or it has taken a long time for Gyumri to rise up. Anything you want to say on this occasion, Benjamin, before I move on?
Okay, I was like child, but still I remember the shock, and I remember the shock of parents and everyone. It was really terrible, and it became more terrible because immediately after that we have collapse of Soviet Union, energy crisis, a war with Azerbaijan. So this was very, very tough. But interestingly, despite all of these very complicated and complex times, Armenia was able to win the war against Azerbaijan, against many odds, by the way, because it seems that Armenia has zero chances to win the war against Azerbaijan, especially with 30% of republic in ruins, with tens of thousands of people killed. But at that time, our society was able to unite and to win the war. So maybe this not only is a history or tragedy, but maybe this should be some source of, I'm not sure to say inspiration or whatever, that even in a very complex, complicated, and tragic times, our nation, Armenians, were able to win. To make victories. So I think we should look also, yes, of course, we should remember the victims, but also we should remember this as a proof that even in very difficult, complex time when perception is that, okay, there is a zero chance of victory or good end, Armenians were able to win.
Good point on perseverance, and I thank you for making it. So let's move to the reality of today. And last week, the list of imprisoned clergy in Armenia grew by one more archbishop. Archbishop Artsakh was arrested, and it's an obvious escalation in the sort of church versus state fight that is currently happening. First, the regime-linked actors leaked an alleged AI video. We all talked about this to humiliate him, and he has firmly denied it. Anyone who is alleged to be in that video has firmly denied being part of it. And when that failed, the state shifted to harsher methods. The investigative committee summoned him under the pretext of helping solve who leaked that video. And as he left the building, the NSS arrested him last week and charged him with narcotics distribution. It's even funny for me to read this, but the case itself is very comical because it dates back to 2018 when members of this sect, which was called New Armenian New Catholicos, broke into Echmiadzin. That was a time of Pashinyan's regime change in Armenia, so there was a big euphoria, and there was this group wanted to also cause a revolution in the church. So they had broken into Echmiadzin, and there's an allegation that Archbishop Artsakh told a clergyman to plant drugs in a trespasser's backpack. Now, this is all allegations which is being denied, but even if that were true, to me, planting drugs, however abhorrent that is not distribution. And that, is also echoed by the Archbishop's legal team. Yet, distribution conveniently carries a long sentence and has a long statute of limitations, which may explain why the NSS chose this particular article in the criminal code. And conveniently, it also makes it more difficult for him to get out of pretrial detention. Now, one more twist to this story, which is that the NSS basically claims that it was merely expediting old cases and not targeting him, but few believe that. So one last twist to this story is that the case landed with none other than Masis Melkonyan, a judge who often receives the regime's political files, and he immediately ordered the 2 months pretrial detention. So to begin with, Benjamin, I want to ask you, if assignment of criminal cases to courthouses is done in random, how do so many political cases or sensitive cases end up with the same judge?
A very good question. I think the only reasonable explanation is that not assignment of all cases are being done randomly. I think this is the only logical explanation which I may assume. I don't know about the details, how this mechanism works, but it looks, let's put it suspicious. It looks suspicious that some cases, and I remember that even before the case landed to that particular judge, the lawyer of Archbishop said that I'm 99% sure that case will be landed to this judge. So the only logical explanation is that not all cases are being done through this automatic system of assignment, whatever system is it. But if we speak about broadly about this fight against the church, I think, of course, the arrest of another bishop is part of this fight, whatever the legal foundation are, and they are absolutely not true, they are partly true or whatever. But if you look into like zoom out from this particular case and from this particular legal accusations and trying to understand like as a strategy but behind the actions, you see that ultimately, and I think Prime Minister repeated it several times in the last week, that his ultimate goal is to force resignation of Catholicos. So my understanding is that all these are part of these efforts to force resignation of Catholicos, and maybe also somehow to prevent this Council of Bishops, because I believe Council of Bishops was supposed to take place December 10, December 12th. My understanding is that it was postponed, and probably this was postponed also because I believe that there are no guarantees or no chances that these arrested archbishops or bishops will be able to take part in this Council of Bishops. So I think this latest arrest has two, and as far as I understand, the Bishop Artsakh has quite close relations with Catholicos. So probably this was another step to put pressure on Catholicos, and Catholicos' brother is in jail. And I think his arrest and his son arrests were also like extended for 1 or 2 months. So all this.
Well, I believe Artsakh is the chief of the secretariat of the Catholicos, right? He's sort of the right-hand man.
Yeah, the right-hand man, or
and
chief
so
of
many of the
secretariat.
archbishops are jailed. You couldn't even have a real quorum if you had the Council of Bishops.
And I heard that the Council of Bishops would also include bishops who are not in Armenia right now, and there was fear, and I remember reading about it, that even they would be arrested if they set foot in Armenia, or maybe they would be prevented from coming to Armenia. So, I mean, isn't this interference in the activities of the church? I mean, when a council of bishops cannot take place in this state of fear and apprehension.
Yes, definitely. But again, strategically, I think another worrisome sign is that we see that I think 10 bishops, if I'm not mistaken, 10, at the end of the day, they signed an open letter calling resignation of Catholicos, somehow joining the demand of Prime Minister, and somehow voicing their concerns that even they, I think, put in doubt the election of Catholicos, telling that, okay, 1999 elections were not free and fair, if I may use this terminology for election of Catholicos. But the message was that elections were not fair, elections were not free, so better Catholicos to resign, and we should have a new Catholicos. But
as far as I'm aware, all of these 10, or many of these 10, actually voted for Catholicos Garing in the second. At least that's what the media claims. So
yeah, I also read some media claims, but as far as I understand, like voting process itself is secret voting. But in any case, this is worrisome because at the end of the day, and we see that now, like Prime Minister and the ruling party establishment with these bishops are taking part in different liturgies with some changed texts. And this is being criticized by other bishops who also, up to 30 bishops, I believe, signed letters supporting Catholicos. So I have
it's a schism. I mean, they're creating a schism in the church.
I have a perception that if this struggle or these efforts to force the resignation of Catholicos are not going to bring results which organizers hope for, then at the end of the day, we may have like divided church. Because, okay, if some bishops, and I think it's not about number, like, okay, 10 bishops support Catholicos or vice versa, 10 bishops are against Catholicos, 30 bishops support Catholicos or vice versa. At the end of the day, we may have like very complex and complicated situation when some bishops, and as far as I know, bishops also usually are head of the dioceses. So these bishops can somehow trying to push forward their understanding in their dioceses, and this de facto, maybe not de jure, but de facto may bring a division of church or establishment of like parallel church or something like that, which of course, I'm not an expert on church history. I believe there were several times when like several competing Catholicoses were in the medieval times. I hope we will not reach the point of having competing Catholicoses, but even dividing church is very complex and complicated. And I don't exclude that maybe the calculation is that when Catholicos or the people supporting Catholicos, they will see the real danger of actual division of the church. Maybe they will believe that resignation of Catholicos is less evil than actual division of church. I just speculate, frankly. I don't know, but one of the end goals of this could be like to put a stark choice in front of Catholicos or in front of church leadership who still supports Catholicos. That okay? Like ultimately, there are two options. Either we are going to have divided church, and then maybe this division may jumper into the outside world, outside Armenia, because I believe one of the bishops of the United States or Northern America, if I remember correctly, also is among the bishops who demand resignation. So at the end of the day, we may have like division of church not only in Armenia, but inside Armenia, but outside Armenia. And again, this could be a very tough choice for Catholicos. Like either you resign, or at the end of the day, your term will be remembered in the history as the term of like first big division of Armenian Church.
Yeah, let's be clear though, this is a political division. This is not an ecumenical schism or anything like that in the
Yes, of course. This is
in the
not like
church. And
1054.
it's likely that, it will not even go past civil contract. At some point, these guys are going to go, and the church will probably end up reuniting.
So we will cover this more in more detail, but I do want to take us back to Archbishop Artsakh, who, I mentioned pretrial detention, and Benjamin, I mean, there are a lot of questions to ask about this case, and we'll try to cover that in the future. But pretrial detention has been the favorite way for this government to, jail political opponents. I think in terms of pretrial detention in all of Europe, Armenia is leading the numbers. I think maybe it's number two after Andorra. But it's meant to be a last resort administrative method. There are other ways you could, do house arrest. You could put an ankle bracelet on someone. What justification do authorities have? And maybe you're not a criminal expert, but do you see any justification, or do you see any attempt to abuse this method of detaining someone for political gain?
I think not only me, but even Ombudsman recently made a statement, and even Minister of Justice. I guess even Minister of Justice 2 days ago made a statement that she is concerned about like a rising number of pretrial detentions, and I think Ombudsman also made such a statement that pretrial detention is really the harshest action, and this should be taken only if there are no other means. And usually, if I just read media, they are telling that okay, pretrial detention is necessary because the person, if he remains in custody, no, he remains in freedom. Sorry, he remains in freedom. He may somehow hinder the investigation. But I think this is like a very basic or standard uh, formulation. Like for anything, you can say, okay, the guy may hinder. But yes, definitely we see that growing number of pretrial detention, and this is source of concern. Like if if even a minister of justice is telling that this is source of concern, we may understand the situation because usually members of government they are trying somehow to justify situation. So this statement by Minister of Justice, if I remember statement correctly, this is like another proof that the situation here is really not good, put it widely.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's go to Gyumri because yesterday was December 7, and what was supposed to be a somber anniversary in the city of that event became the arena for another stage show by Pashinyan in the second largest city. So Pashinyan attended a divine liturgy at Gyumri's Seven Wounds Church. Pashinyan had earlier said that he would only attend churches where the name of the Catholicos is omitted from the liturgy. Mentioning the Catholicos is a required part of the liturgy, and refusing to do so is seen as apostasy by our church. So the head of the Shirak diocese is already in jail, Archbishop Mikhail, and the clergy there say that the NSS contacted them and instructed them to drop the Catholicos name before Pashinyan's attendance. In response, all Shirak clergy, I believe, all the priests and bishops, they signed a statement pledging loyalty to the Catholicos and closed the church to avoid the confrontation. Pashinyan later confirmed that the NSS was involved and unapologetically defended it, with no local clergy willing to cooperate. Outside clergy, maybe I will say the rent clergy, were brought in, and the church door seal was broken in order to hold a service that Pashinyan could attend. And afterwards, the Shirak diocese and the Catholicosate condemned this as a violation of church canon. So, Benjamin, let me put this very politically and mildly. What the frack is the NSS doing, talking to clergy and making demands about the content of the divine liturgy? Why is there no global outrage and condemnation of this deliberate attempt by the head of state using force, using the secret services to interfere with the activities of the church?
I believe in one of his statements, Pashinyan mentioned that the Catholicos is a threat to Armenian national security.
Yeah, Pashinyan mentioned it. And I think even he hinted that Catholicos is somehow cooperating with foreign intelligence agencies. There was some sort of hint, if I understand him correctly.
If he's a foreign agent, wouldn't they just arrest him if they had the proof of doing that?
Probably yes, but you asked about like a global outreach, and global, I guess you mean also outside Armenia, if I understand correctly. Look, okay, mostly in this case, we wait or we hear concerns from the Western institutions, like institutions, countries, because like no one expects that, for example, India will voice concerns, because usually India does not voice concern, or China, or Brazil, or anyone from global South, and Russia also. So regarding the West, my understanding is that there is a constant messaging to the West, to the European and American diplomats and experts and circles, that mostly Armenian Church, or I would say that leadership of Armenian Church, is a tool for Russia to intervene into the domestic political life of Armenia, especially ahead of elections. The leadership of Armenian Apostolic Church are one of the tools of Russian hybrid warfare against Armenian government. And as far as I understand, when you are using these three words, Russian hybrid warfare, like all Europeans and probably many Americans, maybe not Trump administration, but many Americans,
They
but
have seizure.
all Europeans, they like this is something like, I don't know, like a red flag for bull or for bulls or whatever. So if you say, okay, I did this to prevent Russian hybrid warfare or to fight against Russian hybrid warfare, you will be applauded regardless what you are doing. So this is like a magic word. If you want to get approval, applaud, or at least neutral reaction from any action you are taking or for any action you are not taking, you need simply to use these three magic words: Russian hybrid warfare. Then everything is okay. Okay, you will get green light. Do whatever you want, only to fight against Russian hybrid warfare.
What is Russian hybrid warfare?
Okay, good question. Frankly speaking, I'm not an expert on hybrid warfare, and this is a buzzword, and I'm not sure even that many people who use this fully understand. I know that there is a special, like, professional literature on hybrid warfare threats, with volumes and volumes of books. And this is not only about Russia. I may assume that every great or even middle power using hybrid warfare tactics in 21st century. So it's very difficult in this case to understand what people understand under Russian hybrid warfare. But the situation is, according to my understanding, that again, if someone from the West telling, okay, why you did this? Maybe this is not good. Maybe this is not fully in line with, I don't know, rule of law or whatever. And you are telling, yes, I fully understand, but I did this to fight against Russian hybrid threats or to prevent Russian hybrid warfare. You somehow will get green light. And unfortunately, even if you look into the Western expert and also official statement, expert articles, assessment, official statement, many people just out clearly are stating or writing that elections in Armenia are another geopolitical battle between the good West and bad Russia. Like there is a good government who is pro-West. There is a bad opposition and bad church who is pro-Russia. This is a geopolitical battle, so West should do everything to prevent pro-Russian opposition coming back to power. So if you depict, and I'm speaking about articles written about this, you can Google and you will find many very famous names in foreign experts who are covering South Caucasus for decades and who are clearly stating and writing that, okay, the elections, June 2026 elections in Armenia, they are geopolitical elections. It has nothing to do with Armenian people or Armenian domestic issues. This is another battlefield between the Russia and the West, and West should do everything to achieve a victory or to prevent Russia's victory. And if you are telling that, okay, West should do everything to prevent Russia's victory, and then you depict directly or indirectly that anyone who opposes current government from political forces and also church leadership, they are pro-Russians or they are tools for Russian hybrid warfare or they are direct or indirect Russian agents, then everything is very logical. Okay, if your key goal is to prevent Russia's victory, then you should support any action against pro-Russian forces. And if church leadership is perceived as a pro-Russian force, then you should support any actions against the church leadership. I think it's as simple as it is.
I mean, I guess when you have hybrid warfare, there needs to be evidence of that. I mean, I just haven't seen any evidence, but by the same token, you could say that the archbishop who signed that letter from the Western United States, that the head of the diocese may be under the influence of U.S. National, security forces. And I mean, to me, that's just another reason why the church and state should be separate. Are you aware of any publicly disclosed evidence that the Russian government is using the church to interfere in Armenian affairs?
I am not aware of, but my understanding is that for many in the West, they are not too much interested in clear facts, but they are interested in perceptions, and especially the parallels between Moldovan parliamentary elections I think these elections took place in September 2025. There is also clear parallel between Moldovan parliamentary elections and Armenian parliamentary elections. And you can just Google and you will see a lot of analytical articles about Russian hybrid warfare in Moldova. There are many experts also in Moldova who are arguing that Russia spent up to $300 million to create pro-Russian parties, to fund pro-Russian parties, to bribe votes, etc., etc., etc. So from the Western perspective, the same narrative is happening in Armenia. Like in Moldova, there was good pro-Western government or president, Maya Sandu, and there were bad Russia and bad opposition supported by Russia. And Russia spent hundreds of millions of dollars. And also in Moldova, again, according to the West and according to the pro-Western Moldovans, also Moldovan Orthodox Church was part of this anti-West campaign or pro-Russian campaign. So the West, or many in the West at least, I'm not in a position to argue that all, but many in the West, simply they say, okay, if in September 2025, Russia spent hundreds of millions of dollars to illegally support of opposition so that they can come to power, kick out pro-Western Maya Sandu and bring Moldova back to the Eurasian Economic Union, or again make Moldova the colony of Russia or whatever. And Moldovan Orthodox Church or part of Moldovan Orthodox Church was actively supporting pro-Russian forces, then most probably the same may happen or is happening in Armenia. That the opposition supported by Russia and church leadership supported by Russia, they will do everything to kick out this more or less relatively pro-Western government in Armenia. They will try to prevent this Armenia's deepening relations with the EU or whatever is it, even that they may stop this normalization process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And this is also a narrative actively pushed forward by Azerbaijanis that, okay, if current government loses in June 2026, it means end of peace process, it means return of war, and etc. So from Western perspective, yes, they simply looked what happened in Moldova. Again, I'm not an expert on Moldova. I cannot comment what the Russia did or not did. But I'm just telling that according to many sources, including Moldovan sources, there were like hundreds of millions of dollars of spent by Russia in Moldovan elections. So West looked at Moldova, now they look to Armenia, and they simply draw parallels.
Are
Is this
there
logical or
are
not
there
logical?
There's no evidence for that in Armenia. I mean, I'm not sure about Moldova.
and are there estimates of how much the EU spent in Moldova?
I think there are no estimates, but these are like publicly available money. You can look into the recent visits. I mean, the visit which happened before September 2025 by EU to Moldova and also Moldova. But there is another caveat. Moldova is officially candidate status of the EU. And according to EU legislation, if you are candidate status, you already are entitled for getting money. You are entitled to get funding to make your institutions, your procedures, your standards closer to the European Union so that at the end of the day you may become member of the EU. So from European perspective, if there is a funding from EU to the Moldova, this is not hybrid warfare. Moldova is a candidate status of the EU. So according to the EU legislation, all the EU candidate status, like if you go into the, for example, the history of Poland or many other Hungary, Bulgaria, and etc. All these countries, first they became candidate status, or they became candidate countries, even Baltic states. Then during many years, they got significant amount of European money, billions of euros, like to prepare these countries to the membership, to rise the standards, and then these countries became member of EU. So from the European perspective, at least after Moldova became candidate status of the EU, EU has all legitimate rights to provide funding or money to Moldova to prepare Moldova for the membership of the EU. Again, from the European perspective, European money for Moldova, this cannot be perceived as a hybrid threat, hybrid warfare, or interference into Moldovan internal affairs because Moldova is a candidate country, Moldova has a candidate status, and any candidate country is entitled to receive significant European support, including money, to be prepared to finally become member of the European Union. So it's a little bit mixed story, but what I want to say is that unfortunately, for many in the West and almost for all in Europe, elections in Armenia are simply black and white. And elections in Armenia are repeats of elections in Moldova, when there is a good governance and bad opposition.
Yeah, I just have to say one thing. I'm not aware of the Catholicos Garrigan II having any contacts with Russia, but I know that in May of this year, he did go to Switzerland to a conference in Bern and started speaking about the rights of Artsakhs, displaced Artsakhs, and the cultural and religious rights and heritage of Armenians in Artsakh.
That's right.
Yeah, which started this campaign. So I think it's important to highlight that. And just to close this section, Benjamin, I want to ask you, what is the ultimate goal of Pashinyan with this church? You talked a little bit about it, maybe very shortly before we move on. I know we're 30 minutes in, but I want to, get your thoughts on, because just today, or just maybe yesterday, he said that the Armenian flag should be displayed in churches in Armenia, and the divine liturgy should be preceded by singing the Armenian national anthem.
I think it's very complex and complicated to answer to that question. But as far as I understand, which may be completely wrong, I think either he wants to have loyal Catholicos, whatever he understands under loyalty, or if there is no possibility to have a loyal Catholicos, probably he would like to have some sort of parallel church, at least de facto. I'm not sure about the de jure, but at least de facto. At least this is what I see as a two potential possible endgames. Either at the end of the day, Catholicos resigns and there will be new elections, and Prime Minister already stated that the government should have significant say or significant involvement in the election of new Catholicos, or if there is no resignations, then I think we are coming closer to have at least de facto parallel church. Maybe not de jure, I'm not sure, but de facto for sure.
Yeah. And all this also while churches in Armenia have been sealed off, the churches that are led by those some of the renegade priests have they've put locks on them, and even regular believers can't attend there.
Benjamin, you mentioned some of the events in Moldova and how there are parallels to Armenia. So let's talk a little bit about that angle, because in other news from last week, Armenia's foreign minister was in Brussels for the signing of yet another strategic partnership. The strategic agenda for the Armenia-EU partnership was signed, and Kaja Kallas, who is EU's top diplomat, sort of their Secretary of State, but not really, because the EU is not as cohesive as the
Yes.
United States. She complained that Armenia's compliance with the EU directives is only at 37%, and she urged for Armenia to join sanctions against Russia. Can you tell us if this was a demand? How realistic is such an urging, and can Armenia realistically comply with such a thing? I mean, we all know, even from about a month ago when there were all the stories about grain through Azerbaijan, et cetera, that Armenia is trying to diversify its economy essentially away from Russia. That's what diversification really means these days. But is it realistic for Armenia to comply with EU demands to join sanctions against Russia today?
And just to add to that, just today there was news that Armenia plans to import Azerbaijani oil from via Georgia.
So I think we need a few clarifications. First of all, about this Armenia-EU new strategic agenda. So negotiations were underway almost 2 years. The first idea circulated, I think, in February 2024. And at that time, it was simply called Armenia-EU New Partnership Agenda. Then, after Washington Declaration, I think Armenian government asked to put the name strategic. So there was another few months delay of signature. And finally, they signed this in December 2nd, I believe, 2025. EU-Armenia New Strategic Partnership Agenda. So first of all, let's be clear. This is not legal document. This is not replacement of Comprehensive and Enhanced Partnership Agreement, which was signed in November 2017, SEPA. This is not replacement of SEPA. This is not going to be ratified by Armenian Parliament or by any EU member parliament, while SEPA was ratified by European Parliament and all 27 member state parliaments. So legally, Armenian relations are continuing to be based on SEPA. And I think SEPA envisaged the partnership priorities, and first partnership priorities were fixed probably in late 2017, immediately after SEPA, or early 2018. So this is just the next iteration of these partnership priorities. Of course, this will be much deeper document. I believe this is more than 60 pages. This is the new strategic partnership agenda, while previous partnership priorities were 10 pages. But again, legally, there is no qualitative change. So this is not even association.
You're saying that maybe there's no qualitative change, but there's a further definition of what's involved in the scope.
I think this is a further definition how to fully implement SEPA, because despite the fact that SEPA was signed in 2017, partially entered into force in 2018, and fully entered into force in 2021, which means 4 years ago, SEPA fully entered into force, still I believe the realization of SEPA is maximum 50%. Maximum of 50% is realization of SEPA. And these new strategic partnership priorities or strategic partnership agenda, this is about how to more successfully implement SEPA. And of course, there will be some other new elements, for example, cooperation in defense and security, because the Armenia launched political and security consultations with the European Union in 2023. We have this EU monitoring mission, briefly deployed in Armenia in late 2022, and then by 2 years, February 2023, February 2025, and then extended for another 2 years until February 2027. So of course, there are few new components in Armenia-EU relations. EU launched its resilience and growth plan in 2024, allocating 270 million euros for Armenia for the period of 2024-2027. But again, this is not like qualitative change. This is not even association agreement, which Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine signed back in 2014. This is not even the association agreement. And definitely this has nothing to do with potential membership of Armenia into the European Union. Now, regarding statements of Ms. Kaja Kallas that I think Armenian foreign policy is in line with European foreign policy only 37%. Frankly speaking, I'm surprised, and why Armenia's foreign policy should be aligned with EU foreign policy more than 37%, while Armenia is still full member of Eurasian Economic Union. It's a little bit strange to hear such statement because it's the case if I will go to some EU member state and say, look, your foreign policy is in line with Russian foreign policy only in 37%, and this is terrible. But people will say, okay, what the hell I'm doing with Russia? I'm a member of European Union. Let's not forget, Armenia is a full member of Eurasian Economic Union. Yes, Armenian-Russia relations have their ups and downs. We froze our membership into CSTO. We stopped buying anything from Russia. And I would say maybe Russia also is not able to provide too much. So Russia is still providing weapons to Belarus, but I don't want to jump into this area. But still, Armenia is a full member of Eurasian Economic Union. And to say that Eurasian Economic Union member should put sanctions against another Eurasian Economic Union member because of it signed some partnership priorities in line with SEPA, which itself is in line with Armenia's obligations towards Eurasian Economic Union. Because if you remember, in 2017, there was no objection from Eurasian Economic Union, from Eurasian Economic Commission, or from Russia that SEPA violates Armenia's membership into Eurasian Economic Union. And again, as I mentioned, this new strategic partnership agenda, this is based on SEPA, which means that it cannot violate Eurasian Economic Union standards. So the statement of Kaja Kallas, I think, is just a political statement because legally, and I would say even logically, like why Armenian foreign policy should be in line with EU foreign policy, especially regarding to Russia, while again, Armenia still legally or on the paper, military ally of Russia, Armenia full member of Eurasian Economic Union, and EU and Russia are in de facto war, or they are forging proxy war in the territory of Ukraine. So this was a political statement, and my hope is that nobody in Armenian government is going to make a suicide, at least for themselves, because to take any sanctions against Russia, look, even Georgia, which was granted a candidate status for the EU. Georgia is a candidate country for the EU. If you look into where Armenia-EU relations are, legally, I'm not speaking about political terms like statements that we are happy, Armenia is good, Georgia is bad. All these are political statements. Put aside political statements, Georgia is much, much, much further in its relation with the EU than Armenia, because Georgia 11 years ago signed association agreement, which we are not even negotiating. Georgia signed association agreement 11 years ago. We are not negotiating association agreement in 2025. So even Georgia did not impose sanctions on Russia. So this was just a political statement from Kaja Kallas, which my understanding is will not have any real impact on the ground.
But of course, we've seen the kind of trouble that Georgia has had with the EU because they've resisted external influence from both sides, from both Russia and the EU. So, and I think their candidate status has been frozen. Is that true?
No, the membership process has been frozen, not candidate status.
That's right.
So legally, Georgia is still candidate status, though recently in November 2025, just 1 month ago, I think, the European Commission published its membership reports for all candidate countries, including Georgia, and they said that Georgia is a candidate country only on paper. But again, legally, no one canceled Georgia's candidate status. And look, now Georgia has policy which is not in line with EU, but Georgia is a candidate country. Maybe 5 or 10 years from now, there will be another government in Georgia, but the legal base is there, and they immediately can start or restart the process.
So during the same event that we were talking about a moment ago with Kaja Kallas and Arar Mirzoyan, etc., 15 million euros were earmarked for Armenia to support peace and more resilient Armenia. And the officials spoke about threats to Armenia's democracy ahead of elections, which was front and center, I believe, in their mind. And some of the funding will apparently go to what we talked about, Russian hybrid warfare and disinformation, similar to the tactics that the EU claimed they saw in Moldova. What is this money going to be used for if these are specifically the earmarks that they are thinking about? Because let me also say, Benjamin, I read one of the articles which quoted Kaja Kallas, and they were talking about preventing external interference in Armenia's elections, while this money is clearly going to interfere with Armenia's elections. Are they covered under the same partnership relations where, because of Armenia's status, anything that the EU does in Armenia interfering in its elections cannot be defined as interference?
A very good question. Is look, now we live in a post-truth world, so it depends from what perspective you watch. If you look into the Russian media or Russian analysts, they are telling that okay, Russia is doing nothing, but the EU is fully interfering into Armenia's domestic affairs, publicly stating that it will do everything to like prevent pro-Russian forces coming into power. But like this is a political debate. But in reality, okay, I may assume that some money will go for track 2 dialogues. Like what does it mean, prepare for peace? Probably for additional funding could go for different track 2 or track 1.5 dialogues with Azerbaijani experts. Maybe also some more direct dialogues. Direct, I mean bilateral, not meetings outside Armenia and Azerbaijan. And you know that I am part of many initiatives, but also these direct visits. Armenia is going to Baku, Azerbaijan is coming to Armenia. And second, yes, I think there will be significant amount of money to Armenian media, as Europeans are telling Armenian independent media to fight foreign interference, media manipulation. So there is a lot of like buzzwords now. It's like misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, hybrid threat, hybrid warfare, whatever threats. Again, as I said, I'm not sure that many people who are using these terms non-stop, they even fully are aware about academic definitions, because everything has been mixed. There is an academic definitions, what is hybrid warfare, and this is evolving. Like 10 years ago, there was another perception of hybrid war. In 2025, there is another perception of hybrid war. But because everything is politicized, currently, from European perspective, anything which is Russia is doing is a hybrid war, and this should be fight against, or should be fought against.
Yeah.
So I may assume that yes, two main directions: track 2 or track 1.5 diplomacy, and probably support against Russian hybrid threats, whatever we may understand on it.
Yeah, well, they certainly don't have to fund any of the arrests of the clergy, because their silence speaks very loudly about that.
And my comment on that is, shortly before the 2021 elections, several fact-checking organizations started in Armenia. And interestingly, these fact-checking organizations were very much interested in what the opposition was saying. So many opposition media were shut down prior to the 2021 elections. All I can say is probably Daniel Ioannisyan is Media Initiatives Center, will get a lot of money for more fact checking and more
To support democracy.
articles. Yeah, to support democracy, but only
Quote,
if the
unquote.
opposition says
Air quotes.
says something wrong. If Pashinyan says that, Pashinyan's team, I remember many opposition media during that time got banned for
You mean got banned from
quoting
Facebook, like from social media?
from
Yes.
Facebook, from social media, for quoting someone who said something untrue about COVID, right? The pretense was COVID. And then Pashinyan's health minister said that you can't get COVID. I'm going to come and, he threatened, I'm going to come and give you like COVID and everything. And no one, banned him from Facebook. But anyway, let's move on. Another thing that happened is right one day after the OSCE Minsk group was officially dissolved, the Pashinyan regime announced that it was publishing documents related to the negotiation process. But what did it publish? I'll mention a few things. One of the documents was a printout from the Armenian Times, Հայկական Ժամանակ newspaper, from Nikol Pashinyan's newspaper. Another document was from Kazimirov's website, who was once the Russian co-chair, I believe. Another document was an Azeri-Turkish proposal, which, as far as I'm aware, does not become an official document at the OSCE Minsk group. Then Pashinyan published a letter from Serge Sargsyan to Putin, which the Russian government condemned because it violated normal diplomatic ethics. Now, Karen Bekaryan, who is very close to the Serge Sargsyan team, also argues that actually only a small percentage of all documents were generated throughout the 30 years were published. What it didn't publish, we know for sure, was the Key West proposals, the first 3 pages of which have already been leaked in the media, but even that was not published. In response to that question on why he didn't publish it, or why they didn't publish it, Pashinyan said that the Armenian government does not possess such a document. So let me begin by asking you, Benyamin, what was the reason that Pashinyan published only a limited set of documents and not the entire cache of documents? And also, maybe at the same time, regarding Key West, if they didn't have that proposal, couldn't they get it from one of the partner countries?
I think, first of all, let's remember that all this talk about publication of documents were demands by former president, because you know that there was this tit and tat. Pashinyan was demanding debate. Presidents were telling no debate, just publish the documents. So look, I think it's not too much important what happened in Key West, because Robert Kocharan is there and he's telling that what happened in Key West. Like, of course, we may say we cannot like fully trust Robert Kocharan because he was there and probably would like to protect his image or whatever. But I think probably the most interesting part is what happened after 2019, because the last document which was published by government, I think it was June 2019, proposal by the OSCE Minsk group. And the second last was probably this Krakow document, which was discussed in January 2018, I believe, immediately before the change of government in May 2018. But actually, I think now, but more or less we knew about all this. Look, for example, Russian co-chair Popov, I think, published almost entire this Russian proposal or entire OSCE Minsk group proposal in early 2021. So to say that for expert communities, it was something significantly new. Of course, it's interesting to have all the text, at least on the documents which were published. But again, I'm not in a position, for example, I myself, who are covering this process starting from 2008, 2009, even before Kazan summit of 2011. It's not things that, okay, I'm shocked, or I supposed completely different things. For ordinary population, even I'm not very much sure that in these crazy times when every day there is a new news, fight against church, I don't know, fight against this, that ordinary citizens are too much interested. But for example, for me, it will be interesting also to have the publication of document, or at least publication of some details of negotiations, what happened after 2019. What happened after Armenia received this June 2019 proposal? What was Armenia's answer, if there was answer? Why there was no answer, if there was no answer? What was Azerbaijani answer, if there was Azerbaijani answer? And also, for example, were there any negotiations or discussions between June 2019 and September 2020? And also,
Well,
of
we
course, it's
also
interesting.
know, but we know that
Yeah,
right after the June 2019 proposal, 1 month or less than a month later, Pashinyan went to Artsakh and said that Artsakh is Armenia, period.
yes, I think
So
it was
that's an
August
interesting fact.
2019. And also, it's very interesting to understand what happened between November 2020 and September 2023. For example, what was the discussions preceding the Prague, October 2022 Prague declaration, through which Armenia recognized Nagorno-Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. So frankly speaking, from like interest of expert and also for like every citizen, I think it's not very much interesting what was Key West, because at the end of the day, we know that President Aliyev rejected Key West. Yes, there is some criticism also against Robert Kocharan that Key West was bad, but logic tells that if Key West was bad for Armenia, then probably Heydar Aliyev, who was a smart person, would not reject it. So we know that Heydar Aliyev rejected Key West. So I think it's not like the vital to know details about Key West. We know that Heydar Aliyev rejected Key West. We know that Ilham Aliyev rejected the Kazan document. These are facts.
I think it's really important what you're saying, Benjamin, that it's not really that important to worry about Key West because that's 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Basically, the outcome is known in the last 25 years. Really, what's important is 2019 and forward. The rest is just
But also,
hubris.
yeah. So let me close this topic by also asking one more question and we'll move on. Pashinyan's argument is that starting from the declaration of the OSCE Lisbon Summit in 1996, the OSCE Minsk Group was always going to support Azerbaijan's claim of territorial integrity, and that the international community was using the Nagorno-Karabakh issue as to tie a rope on Armenia's neck. Can you just very quickly, maybe even yes or no, say, do you believe that is the case?
Okay, on first question, definitely no, and even documents published by government itself shows that this was not the case. Regarding the international community, let's forget about international communities. There is not such thing. Let's be very clear. All great and middle power, they are trying to use every conflict in the world to push forward their interest. This is basic nature. It's the same natural as humans are breathing. So it's the same case if I will accuse someone of breathing. This is nonsense. Humans should breathe. Great and middle powers, they are using conflicts to promote their interest. Also, this is the fact. But this does not mean that because of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, as all other conflicts in the world were used by great or middle powers for their interest, this does not mean that Armenia should agree to destroy Nagorno-Karabakh. As simple as it is.
Mm-hmm. I think the documents that were published by Popov also corroborate your statements that what Pashinyan was claiming were just not true at the time. But allow me to move us forward. We're way into our show. Let's hit our topic, which has to do with the results of a poll by the Arar Foundation that were released last month. For our listeners, we're putting the details of methodology and the links in the show notes, so please go over there and take a look. It's podcasts.groong.org/episode number.
We will also put the links to the poll that you can download yourself from the Arar Foundation website.
That's right. So let's focus on the slide asking for the satisfaction levels regarding various Armenian institutions, the parliament, the armed forces, police, the government, and the Armenian Church. And we see that the National Assembly and the government have some of the lowest satisfaction ratings, while the armed forces, the church, and also the police have reasonably high satisfactions. Can you explain these results, Benyamin? Why is it that the government has such low levels of satisfaction, and a little bit more about why the police, for example? I have some questions about why you would think that the police has higher levels of satisfaction. What people would include in their understanding of a poll, a question about the police?
To be frank, I also surprised about police because we see that there is an increase of criminal acts in Armenia. So I'm not sure why people should be happy from police. Maybe they are happy from these patrol police, who are very useful, at least during the evening and morning rush hours. They are somehow regulating the crazy traffic in Yerevan. And maybe for many people, the interaction with police are mostly through this petrol police, with these brand new electric Volvos or whatever. And also like helping ease the traffic jams in rush hours in the morning and evening. Maybe this is why for many people, when you ask about police, they immediately they see in their mind like petrol police helping them to navigate the traffic, and they say, yes, this is a good job is done. So this is one of the explanation, because generally I'm not sure that, for example, criminal situation in Armenia is very easy, or like the crime is going down, as far as I know. Regarding the church, I think we discussed already once, like the church always had a high ratings, I think starting from late 1990s, early 2000s, when
That's
this
right.
sociological survey started to be done. And I remember always under Robert Kocharian, under Serge Sarkisian, church and army, they had higher ratings than, for example, president or parliament. Okay, at that time president, because until 2018, Armenia was presidential republic. But also there is one interesting thing that, for example, if you look into the polls, and I remember the polls which were conducted between November 2020 and September 2023. And there were several questions like, okay, would you agree that Nagorno-Karabakh can be part of Azerbaijan with guaranteed rights for Armenians? Again, with guaranteed rights for Armenians, which means with Armenian population in Artsakh. And more than 90% in Armenia were telling, no, this is absolutely unacceptable. We will never accept Artsakh being part of Azerbaijan with guaranteed rights for Armenians. Then September 2023 happened, ethnic cleansing, no Armenians in Artsakh for more than 2 years. And besides like few days of protests, mostly organized by people, Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh on September 19, 2021, and then the protest of this spiritual movement of Archbishop Bagrat, but this was driven by delimitation in Tavush. It was not solely driven by what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. We don't see significant protests. So I think we should use, there is an English saying it, you should use it with a bit of salt or something like that. I think we should take with a bit of salt this sociological survey result, because sometimes people are answering what seems morally right, like morally right. Of course, you should say, yes, I'm happy to see Artsakh as a part of Azerbaijan. Yes, it seems nonsense and seems morally outrageous. But it does not mean that you are ready to do anything to prevent that. And here there is a difference between what people think and what people are ready to do, even small sacrifice. I'm not speaking about ultimate sacrifice, like go to the war to be killed or etc. But very small sacrifice, like, I don't know, to sacrifice your time, potentially to sacrifice your job or whatever. So I think if we would like to better understand the situation, we should take this into account, because otherwise we are seeing a little bit different reality. Reality according to polls and reality which we see with our own eyes. And also regarding the church, I think because at least the current government is depicting its fight against leadership of church. Yes, the narrative of the government is this. They are not telling we are fighting against Armenian Apostolic Church. We want to destroy Armenian Apostolic Church. Their narrative is we are trying to purify Armenian Apostolic Church. So to better understand what people think about Armenian Apostolic Church leadership, I would advise to ask people two questions. What your opinion about Armenian Apostolic Church, and what is your opinion about the leadership or highest leadership of Armenian Apostolic Church? Because look, when these 10 bishops signed a letter demanding resignation of Catholicos, all social media, including opposition media, were full of stories, yes, that all these 10 bishops, they are involved in many acts which are not in line with spiritual or church issues, yes? They have been accused of being businesses, driving luxurious cars, even having children, etc., etc. But we are speaking about bishops, and all ordinary people are reading this. And to be very fair, well before 2018 Velvet Revolution, there was a lot of rumors about many bishops in Armenia, at least. I'm not sure this was the case in diaspora.
Well, that is
You
the
may
case
tell,
in the
maybe.
diaspora as well.
Maybe this is case in the diaspora. I don't know what average Armenian American thinks about bishops who are ruling Armenian Church in the United States. But well before 2018 Velvet Revolution, there were a lot of criticism, a lot of rumors, and a lot of talk among ordinary people that, oh, look, you know, this bishop has restaurants, this bishop has business, this bishop, I don't know, imports cars, exports cigarettes, he has wife, he has children, he has mistresses, and hell knows what. Again, of course, all this was like under the surface discussions, but it means that for a significant part of Armenian population, I'm not sure about numbers. It could be 20%, it could be 40%, but definitely this is not like 1% of marginals. Well, before 2018, there was a lot of suspicions that high clergy are involved in many things which are not in line with spiritual rules of Christ or of spiritual rules of the Armenian Church. And I think this is one of the reasons why when a government says that I'm fighting against leadership of the church, government knows much better. And let's not forget that before 2018, government was part of opposition. So they know very well that in early 2000s, I don't know, in 2007, 2010, 2013, 2015, all these rumors were there that many bishops are involved in many, many bad things. So now the government are trying to send this message that, look, guys, we all know, like this was a very badly kept secret that significant part of our leadership of Armenian Church were involved in very bad things. So what is your problem? We are just telling publicly or loudly what was discussed in the last, I don't know, decades.
Well, of course, the timing becomes very suspect, right? Why did you select to do all of this suddenly right now?
I fully agree
why
that
did you
timing
start?
is.
Why did you start this with complete character assassination?
So I fully agree, but I'm just telling that we should separate because again, I'm telling that I'm not sure about Soviet time because Soviet time it was different. Church was under pressure of the government, and also there was a Catholicos of Vazgen first who was really revered by almost as a saint about absolute
But even at the
majority
time,
of
there were
Armenians.
but for I
Yes,
mean,
there were some claims, but not the widespread claims. Like you cannot compare perception of clergy during Soviet time, as far as I know, with perception of clergy now. So again, it will be interesting to see the sociological surveys with the direct question, what do you think about leadership of the church?
In the context of this election, does it make sense for Pashinyan to be doing this against the church, which has one of the highest ratings of satisfaction?
Logic tells no. But also my understanding is that at least prime minister is quite smart in politics, maybe not in a strategic thinking. So I think probably he has his own calculation. But if you are asking me, I would not advise to do that. From my understanding, this definitely should not help. This either will harm or at least would not help for sure. But this is my understanding.
I think it's interesting to look at the demographics on the responses. You know, the most favorable response for the government came from the 45 to 60 and 61 and above age groups, the boomers and the Generation X.
They were supportive of government or anti-government, sorry.
Supportive of
Supportive.
government. Yeah. And the biggest supporters of the church, nearly 82.5% of people aged 18 to 28-year-olds have a positive view of the church, which is
that's pretty amazing, isn't it, Hovik? I mean, mostly we would think about like the older people to be traditionalists and stuff like that, and here we're seeing a completely opposite picture.
Yeah.
But maybe only one explanation is that older people also they were like raised in Soviet Union when they were under atheism ideology. Let's not forget also that.
Okay.
And also,
Maybe.
probably many older people are less literate in internet media. And also, especially if they reside in the regions, then they only get state-run media broadcast to them. So I think that's another factor for the support for Pashinyan. So the only other topic that I want to address from this poll is two questions related to the Armenia's foreign strategic partnership and the Russian base. So one of the questions asked, which of the following five powers, and the five powers are US, EU, Turkey, Russia, and Iran. So which one should Armenia form a military strategic alliance with? The top response was 37.8% for Russia. This rating, and according to the same pollster, this rating has risen every year or every time they have made a poll. And in July 2024, it was only at 24.3%. So it has risen from 24.3 to 37.8. The second runner-up on this question, strategic partnership, was the United States with 18.3% saying that it should be the United States that Armenia partners with. And number three is Iran. So very nice bunch of heterogeneous answers here. EU was
Talk about
15.9%.
diversification, huh, Hovik?
Yes.
Yeah, diversification of our brains. That's EU was 15.9% and Turkey was 5.4%. That is really surprising. But the other question was that how do you view the Russian military base in Gyumri and Russian military in Armenia in general? 64% had a positive view, and only 32% had a negative opinion. So, Benjamin, how do you interpret these results, and what is driving the positive dynamics of the view of Russia over the last year?
Let's start from second question about Gyumri military base. I think this is clear indication that still A, there is a fear from Azerbaijan and Turkey for military pressure on attacks against Armenia, and B, there is a lack of trust that this normalization process with Azerbaijan and Turkey will bring to tangible results. Regarding the rising Russia's perception, I think even in IRI poll, in recent IRI poll, I think last poll was in June 2025, there was decline of the support to the EU membership. First time, I think, for a few years, the EU membership supports declined below 50%, was 49, I believe. And also there was a slightly rise of Russia. I think two aspects here. First, probably the successes of Russia in the battlefield in Ukraine sends a message to Armenians that, okay, Russia still is a very strong power. He's able to resist the collective West, like 50 or 60 almighty countries in the world. They are not able to defeat Russia, which means Russia is still strong. And people like somehow, especially people who feel not secure, and it's clear that Armenians feel not secure, they are like inclined to have better thinking about the stronger side, especially the side which has connections with Armenia, etc., etc., etc. Probably answer number one or explanation number one. Explanation number two, probably there is some sort of slight erosion of trust in the West. Like, yes, West speaks very good things, but at the end of the day, West not only didn't prevent ethnic cleansing, but West more or less legitimized ethnic cleansing, because now when you look into the US-Azerbaijan or EU-Azerbaijan relations, no one speaks about ethnic cleansing, which is a gross violation of international humanitarian law and international law. But the US and the EU, at least the US until Trump and EU also now, they claims that they are value-based organizations, first of all. But they are telling, oh, Azerbaijan is our strategic partner. Let's speak about middle corridor, gas, oil. No one remembering that, okay, Azerbaijan was a country who organized gross violation of international law and international humanitarian law. I think this all send like mixed messaging to Armenians. Like, okay, what these guys are about.
All right, folks, let's wrap up for today. That's all the time we have. I'd like to ask each of you if you have something on your mind that you'd like to share with our listeners. Hovik?
Well, we just talked about polls and elections, and we will be talking a lot about that. But I think we shouldn't delude ourselves to believe that the elections in 2026 will be free or fair. Yes, this is a black pill, but I'm pretty sure that Samet Karapetyan will not be allowed to run. I'm pretty sure the Moldovan scenario will be repeated. And I do believe these polls do represent the view of people, but they'll be forced to deal with realities such as candidates being banned from running and an enormous amount of EU money and other actions to support this regime. But I think it's still important to keep our pulse on the view of the people. So, I have no illusions about the 2026 elections. I think it's going to be important for post-election processes to have as much legitimacy as possible. But something tells me that Pashinyan may even go to the point of not recognizing the results because he can declare a state of emergency as a sort of a circuit breakers, and if he and not recognize the results of the elections. He has all those tools, and he will use every single tool to keep his traitorous regime in power.
Benyamin, what's on your mind?
I would briefly probably repeat what I said earlier, that let's look what happened in between 1988 and 1994. From 2025, it seems that this was a terribly situation. Earthquake, 30% of Republic is in ruins, war, crisis, food crisis, electricity crisis, every crisis. But still, we emerged victorious. So let's look to that and let's understand that we are able to win even on the extreme situations. And let's not forget about that.
Okay. Thank you. That was kind of a high note you're leaving us with, so a little unusual for our show. Thank you, Benjamin, for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That was our weekend review recorded on December 8, 2025. We've been talking with Dr. Benyamin Poghosyan, who is a senior fellow at APRI Armenia, a Yerevan-based think tank, and he's also the chairman of the Center for Political and Economic Strategic Studies. More information at podcast.groong.org/episode number.
And if you're listening until this point, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are a fine Armenian, and we even have some non-Armenians listening to us who are learning about Armenia. I really love it. I would never, imagine that happening. So thank you. Please consider supporting us. Like, share, comment, and maybe even financially. Podcast.groong.org/donate.
Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
I'm Hovik Manucharyan from Yerevan.
And I'm Asbed Bedrossian in Los Angeles.
Have a great day.